I was frustrated by the lack of movement or the lack of not being able to do things as quickly. But I saw it more as a brain reset. It's like my brain was reset to a childhood time. For example, when my speech started to return, I had a really, really clear British accent. And my first 5 years of life were in the UK. So that's what I had as a really small child. And suddenly I was speaking with this British accent again to the speech therapist. And it wasn't till, weeks later that my old Australian accent returned.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gasiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome once again to the Recovery After Stroke podcast. This is episode 241 and my guest today is Andrew Stops, who recovered from a brain tumor and also experienced an ischemic stroke in 2021. Andrew Stops, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Tell me a little bit about what happened to you, Andrew.
I had my stroke in November 2021. So, but it wasn't the first brain injury that I've had. I had a brain tumor before that, back in 2005, and I was treated with radiation for that. And I didn't really have any after effects other than right side deafness. And then 2021, I had the stroke, and it was such a surprise because it literally came out of nowhere.
How old were you?
47.
And how old were you when you had the brain tumor?
2005. That made me max. I can't remember.
Roughly, just give you like
in my 20s somewhere.
In your 20s, that'll do, man. That's all right. In your 20s, that's pretty full on, right? To get that kind of diagnosis, you're probably at the peak of energy, running around, doing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and it kind of like, it's the tumor that I had was an acoustic neuroma, so it's a slow growing tumor, but mine was atypical as it was growing really fast. But it doesn't give you any side effects early on, so you don't even know you've got it. The reason I knew I had it is that one day I just woke up and half my face was paralyzed, and that sort of led to scans, and they saw the tumor really close to my brainstem, like touching my brainstem, and so something had to be done straight away. So they irradiated my head.
I'm smiling because that sounds really intense. Was it intense, radiating your head?
Yeah, well, because your head's in a cage. They make a mold, okay, and they put your head in a cage, and for 5 days straight, they shoot radiation through different points in your head that all converge on the tumor.
Right.
And I chose that route to go because it has the least side effects afterwards. If I had it operated on and cut out, it probably would have left my face paralyzed, and I would have had no chance of getting my hearing back ever. And being as I'm a musician, I want that, I want that possibility.
I hear you. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was successful treatment.
Yes. It didn't really save my hearing though. It was the tumor grew too fast, and it was growing out of the auditory nerve, so it damaged the nerve too much. But it stopped the tumor, and it killed it basically in my head. So I just got on with life and what I had to do.
Excellent. So there was no deficits or anything like that you had to do?
Oh, except for the deafness.
Yeah.
That's all. My face returned to normal. And I thought, that's it. I've done the brain stuff now. It's, I can get on with life. And it wasn't to be. It was not to be.
How did the ischemic stroke come to happen?
So it happened on a Saturday morning in November 2021, and I woke up about 6:30, and I immediately felt strange. I immediately felt off balance, and I thought, oh, I have some balance problems from the residue from the tumor. So I thought, oh, it's just that, and I'm just tired. So I went downstairs and I started making myself a coffee, and I went to grab the handle of the cupboard with my right hand, and I couldn't. I kept missing. I couldn't seem to find the handle, and I thought, wow, this is really weird. I must be really tired. So I eventually got the cupboard open, got a cup out, tried to make myself a coffee, and I was missing. I just could not. My hand couldn't find objects. I could still grab, but I couldn't physically find them in space. And after about 5 minutes of this happening, I thought, no, something's really wrong. Like, I didn't think stroke at that point. I went and woke my partner, my husband, up, because I like, this was too weird, like, and I went to say, something's going on, and I couldn't. I was just mumbled, and at that moment we knew, get to hospital now, let's go. So we went straight to the hospital, and they took me through, and it was a TIA, so it resolved. So I was laying there, and all the, like, everything resolved, and I was back to normal. And so the hospital was discharging me, and just as they were filling out the forms, and the doctor was with me, she said, look, just one more test, just touch my finger, touch your nose. And so I did that, and I went, my arm is really heavy. And she said, do it again. And I was getting lower and lower and lower. And that's the big stroke happened right in front of the doctor.
Wow. So a bit of good luck in a really shitty situation.
Yeah.
And then, do you remember what happened after that, or are you admitted? And
I remember bits and pieces. So I remember thinking the whole time, this is very interesting. Like, I wasn't scared. I was just dispassionately observing what was happening to my body. I remember my arm getting heavier and heavier and heavier until I couldn't lift it anymore. And I didn't so much get paralysis of the leg, but I lost, my foot just flopped, and my speech became really, like, incoherent. I just remember being willed to get a CT scan, MRI, and then I was up in critical care. And it was up in critical care, actually. There's a sort of a blank spot in my memory going from emergency up to critical care. But I remember being up there, and I think that was when it hit me, and I just, like, burst into tears and just sobbed, like, for ages, about what had happened. And then after that, sleeping. I was so tired I couldn't keep my eyes open, and I remember just sleeping for hours and hours.
Just a quick break, and we'll be right back to the interview. As a stroke survivor, I understand the difficulties of finding the right information about post-stroke nutrition. That's why I developed the course, 5 Foods to Avoid After Stroke. While most people are talking about what to eat after a stroke to support brain health and recovery, very few are talking about what you should avoid eating after a stroke. If you want to support your brain to heal, are curious about the 5 foods that may make matters worse, when you can recoveryafterstroke.com/courses to check them out now. Do they know what the underlying cause of the ischemic stroke was?
No. And even now, I saw the specialist about 3 weeks ago, and he said, look, it's probably a good thing we don't know what caused it, because that usually has the best prognosis. Okay. So I thought, well, okay, I'll go with that. Yep.
I love it. I love it. Why not? We don't know what caused it. Look, maybe it won't ever happen again, so why not? Just go with it for now. But the thing about it is you had this experience in your 20s. I've done the calculation. I reckon you were 27. And then when you've had this experience, are you comparing the two? What are you doing about your previous experience? How is that playing a role in your current situation?
Yeah, well, yes, it does in as much as my attitude towards it was the same. It's like, oh well, here we go again.
Uh-huh.
And the first one, the prognosis was, really bad if I didn't have something done. So it's just kind of, here we go again,
Is that here we go again from this is something we're going to get through, overcome, or here we go again, this is bad, not good?
No, it's we're going to overcome it. And like literally, I mean, Saturday had the stroke. Monday morning, I was moved to a ward, and it was just like, right, what do I have to do? What do I have to do to get better? And physio started that day, rehab started that day, and I was just determined to get functioning again from literally the get-go. Like I was really determined.
Yeah. It sounds like it. I like it. I like it.
It's funny though, because they don't tell you a lot of things. I've learned so much by researching myself, finding exercises myself, finding stuff, rehab stuff that's specific to what I wanted to do. And being a trained musician, like I had an insight to my body's musculature, and breathing and the way I learn. So I was able to sort of build on that to help with the recovery. Even with the hand, like that, I mean, you can see this is my deficit hand.
Yeah.
So I've, getting back the movement in that, and I've been using this device. It's a little practicing device used to practice a brass instrument, but I'm using it to isolate my fingers. So, and will strengthen them. So,
and you've seen an improvement and noticed the difference between when you started and now?
Oh my God, yes. Oh yes. Considering as like for the first 6 weeks, I had nothing in my arm. It was just a dead mass on the side of my body. I can use it, almost normally. I can't write yet. I can't pinch yet because my thumb sort of pinches aside. But other than that, I can pick stuff up, I can, not for very long. I mean, I'm mostly use my left hand to type. My right hand does type, but my fingers get tired. But I try to incorporate my right hand like in everything that I do. So whatever I'm doing, I make sure my right hand is doing some part of that task. So I'm not, it's not getting a practice non-use.
Let's actually repeat that, because that's a really important point you just made. So why are you including your hand in everything that you do?
So that I'm not developing practice or non-use. Non-use.
So it's kind of neuroplasticity in a negative way. It's the opposite of using your hand to practice something so that it can create new neural pathways in your brain and then start working. It's the opposite of that. It's like if you're not using it, there could be two reasons why somebody doesn't get movement back in one of their limbs, specifically a hand for this example. One of the reasons is that there was a stroke and the pathway is no longer there, or has been interrupted with, or has been inflamed, or there's something wrong with the pathway that tells the hand to move from the brain. There's a connection issue. And the other one is where the hand, because of that connection issue at the beginning, is excluded from being used, and then it develops the pathways for non-use. So
non-use,
it doesn't actually then work, not because it's damaged. It may have healed, but it hasn't been used, so the practice is gone, and then it's the whole use it or lose it routine.
Yeah, definitely. And I was aware of that from really early on. And it was really important to me to get my arm moving again. I remember, like, you get 6 weeks like rehab at home rehab here in New Zealand from, you know, when you're discharged. And so for that 6 weeks, yeah, we weren't getting very much movement at all. Like, had a little bit, but not much. And then I found that if I yawned, and when you yawn, you know, you automatically stretch. Well, if I was in a laying position and I did that, my arm would lift up by, you know, as involuntary movement. And so I worked with that. I kept doing that until I could lift up standing and do that, and gradually my arm movement came back. But it all started from like that involuntary movement.
If I'm in bed and yawn and stretch and do those big morning stretches, like you said, my left leg, I get cramps in my left leg. It goes from okay to cramping, and it bloody annoys me because I love waking up in the morning and doing that stretch. It's kind of gets things going, and my left calf will go into spasm.
Actually, I was right side deficit. I get that too if I stretch my right leg out in bed in the morning. I get really bad cramp. Like it's like
resetting it's so hard to reset it and to get the cramp to stop. It's like, I mean, I've never had cramps before, and I understand now what happens when people suffer from cramps all the time. But that pinpoint pain in that one spot in the muscle that just goes deeper than the depth of the earth.
I know.
Unbelievable. How do they do that? How do they do that? How does it do that?
Yeah, I know. And I just trying to move your foot to stretch out the cramp is excruciating. Yeah, I try really hard not to stretch my legs in the morning because it's not worth it. It's not worth the pain. So
I wonder if anyone else goes through that. If people are watching and listening and they do go through that, let me know in the comments, or just let me know. I'd love to know if that happens. I didn't think that you were going to say, oh, yeah, that happens to me too. I had no idea you were going to say that. I thought that was just me, but it just goes to show.
The other thing that I found interesting is that sometimes in my right foot, there'll be like a nerve fires and my foot just twitches like totally randomly. And it feels almost like someone's putting a feather or something on my foot, and my foot's like ticklish. Yeah, it just happens like at random times. Yeah, that's been really weird as well. That and my diaphragm muscles on my right side twitch if I get very emotional. So if someone says something and I have an emotional reaction, the old pre-stroke Andrew normally kept really stoic, but the post-stroke Andrew, I get this emotional twitch that almost comes out like a laugh, and that could be it could be someone's told me something really sad or anything, but I like immediately like let out this laugh, which is not meant to be. No, it's not a funny laugh at all. It's my diaphragm twitching. That's been embarrassing at times and interesting as well.
All right. Have you heard of the pseudobulbar affect?
Yeah, I think I have, but remind me.
Pseudobulbar affect, it's a condition that happens to people who have neurological injuries like strokes. And I had the symptoms of it. And for me, pseudobulbar affect caused crying, uncontrollable crying in inappropriate moments. And what I learned after I discovered that it was about inappropriate crying, which is very common for stroke survivors, I also learned that there's another version of it, inappropriate laughing at in moments
Yep.
such as funerals, and really non-appropriate places like that.
Yep. I can relate to that. And also because like this side of my face wasn't really affected too much by the stroke, just my tongue and like sort of around my mouth. But yeah, I'll break into a smile uncontrollably, which sometimes is great, but sometimes is really inappropriate.
Yeah.
And I just have to like, cover my face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And pretend you're not smiling. Interesting. Is there something that you wish they did for you or told you in hospital during your stay so that would make your time at home better?
Lots of things. Um, uh, God, where to start? I mean, I can't complain about the care I had in hospital, but the doctors just talk about, neurological medical things, and don't talk to you about all the other stuff that you experience when you've had a stroke. Like, like you were saying about inappropriate crying, I found, especially in the first 6 months, that if something moved me, it would move me to tears, like immediately, and I would be bawling. And the same with, the opposite. If something moved me to laugh, I would be laughing hysterically. Like I would be at the extremes of the ranges. There was no subtlety. And
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
that was kind of scary because I thought, oh God, I don't want to be like this for all my rest of my life. This is, it's too much. The thing about practicing, my rehab and doing the rehab, I found that I went and discovered exercises myself because I wasn't being told or given guidance in that area. I just found I really had to be self-reliant in as much as my recovery went and what I wanted from it.
Self-motivated and taking the responsibility for that path of your recovery and kind of leading the charge. Is that what it was like?
Yeah, I mean, the rehab team in the first 6 weeks set me some goals of what they wanted me to do. Like, we've got a 2-story house, and one of the goals was to be able to get up the stairs, and things like being able to shower and dry myself, being able to be in the kitchen and butter bread, and so all those things. When I had those goals, I just practice them, and by the time they come the next week, I was able to do them all. But they weren't giving me things. They were just things to help me, with the big things in life. They weren't other things I needed to fully recover. They were just things I needed to get by.
All right, so tell me, what were some of those things you needed to fully recover? As in, well, knowing that now, you probably didn't leave hospital saying in your head, oh, I'm going to need all these things. You got home and then you thought, oh, what about this? And then you thought, oh, what about that?
Yeah.
Do you know what those things are now? Would you be able to tell us?
just things like, okay, well, I can, they've taught me how to butter bread with my left hand, but how am I going to teach my right?
Okay, the right hand, which is the
The
stroke
affected
hand.
side. Yeah. So
Okay.
they were giving me lots of things, and lots of exercises to do that were sort of replacing the deficit side rather than teaching it. And I knew already then that if I didn't use the side, it would be neglected and would learn non-use.
Yeah.
So rather than teaching me to butter with my left hand, which was really good initially, like early on when I couldn't hold a knife, I had they weren't around when I needed to learn how to do it. And learning how to hold a pen again. I remember the one thing I did just before I left for hospital on the morning of the stroke is, in the kitchen was a piece of paper, and I wrote on the paper with my right hand, "I am Andrew Stops." And it's the last thing I wrote before I lost the use of the hand. And it's really interesting. I wrote that because I was sort of like asserting my identity, or saying, this is who I am. I've got to remind myself who I am. I don't know why I did that. It's very strange.
That is very strange. That's extremely strange. Now, I love that you did it. I'm Andrew Stops. You came home. Did it mean anything to you when you saw it? When you saw it again, or did you see it again? And
Well, it had a really powerful effect, because when I got back and I saw it, I thought, I am not Andrew Stops now. I am something new, someone new. I'm not the same person who wrote that piece of paper. And I've especially the last 6 months, I've really been working on what is my identity and what is self-identity, and what it all means, and not get too caught up in what I've lost.
Yes, let's describe. Let's talk about that. So, out of curiosity, how would you have described yourself before the stroke? Okay, and the example is, I'll do mine. I'm Bill. I'm a father of two. I'm a husband. Go to work. I enjoy sport. I ride a bike. Those types of things. That's how I would have. That's how I'm doing it now, 10 years later. I don't know what I would have done 10 years ago, but that's how I would describe it now. So your stroke was a little bit more recent. So I'm curious, do you know how you described yourself to somebody who asked you, who is Andrew Stops, a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
How
So musician, composer, educator, husband, brother. I like riding bikes too. Those, but particularly musician and educator were like,
okay, the biggest part, the most broadest part, or the part that you identified with the most. But there seems to be a little bit of broadness to your identity. You're all these other things while you are a musician, right? So when you came home, how would you have described yourself then?
Initially, when I came home and I saw that piece of paper, and I thought, I am not that Andrew Stops anymore. But it was so overwhelmingly painful. I left it, and I just focused on like trying to claw back the person that I was. Now, I really did some exploration, especially over New Year's. And New Year's, it really struck me the most, because every year of my life, the new year, I knew what was coming up, and there were no surprises. Like, I knew what this year was gonna bring. And this year, for the first time in my life, I didn't know. Like, even last year was going to be recovery. So last year I knew what it was. This year I had no idea. And I got really, really scared and really depressed, and I started to think about who I am and identity. And I thought about, I must have had a time in my life when I didn't have a very strong identity, like, or any at all, when I wasn't a musician or an educator. So I thought back, and I can remember a time when I was 18 months old and my dad was holding me up in his arms. And I remember me saying to him, "Dad, can I have a brother?" And Dad said, "I'll talk to your mum and we'll see what we can do." I can remember it so vividly. And I had to,
18 months old.
yeah. And I had to have been 18 months old.
You didn't speak it in words, or were you speaking?
I could speak then. Yeah. I could speak at 18 months.
And you said you wanted a brother.
Yeah. And I got one. So I was really, but I remember that memory so vividly.
Right.
And I thought to myself, okay, who was I then? Like, if I look through the eyes of the 18-month-old me, what did I see? And I saw potential. And I thought, that's who I am. I'm potential.
Right.
And as soon as I realized that, I stopped stressing about who is Andrew Stops.
Okay, I love it. So let's go back for 1 second. You're a musician before the stroke.
Yep.
After the stroke, you don't cease to be a musician. Do you feel like you have ceased to be a musician at that moment? Because it's not true that just because you can't hold your favorite instrument that you're no longer a musician. So how does that impact you? Like, what's happening there at that moment? How does that identity become challenged?
Not being able to play my instruments is hard, because I had them. I mean, in this room here, I have like a keyboard over there and a clarinet down there, and I can twiddle away with my left hand on them, but like I can't play them anywhere near like I used to. I can compose though still, but yeah, it's.
And just because you can't play, does that mean you're no longer a musician?
No, it doesn't, because everything's there. Everything's in my head. I still know how to play. My right hand just feels like it's in molasses. And so
feels like it's in molasses.
Yeah.
I love it. What a great explanation.
It's just, this thick something it's in. And I mean, I've held my clarinet and moved my fingers on my right hand, but they're really slow. I mean, I'm grateful that I can, especially after 14 months. I'm so grateful that I can move my fingers independently, but they're just slow. So I guess, I'm still a musician, but I'm just now a non-practicing musician. I guess that's what it is.
Like a lot of Christians or Catholics.
Yep.
We still identify as whatever we are, but we don't practice anymore or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear you. All right. So that's the thing. I've been doing I've been in my own mind trying to work out what is the thing that's mourning, that people mourn. And I don't know, I don't speak for everybody, but I'll speak for myself. So I'm wondering that question. So it's something that I've been thinking about the last few months particularly. And I'm not sure where I heard it, but I think somewhere what I heard was that people mourn the potential that they cannot any longer achieve. And that potential is what they mourn. And when I think about me, there's definitely no mourning of my past self, like the self that was totally physically able to play sport, for example, or to ride a bike without feeling the left side, go all stiff and all that sort of stuff. I didn't mourn having to change the way that I worked because I was working really terribly and in an unhealthy way. I didn't mourn my personality, or because that was not really the best kind of me that I could be. But I was mourning the potential that I wasn't going to achieve, or stuff that perhaps now that I've had the stroke, I'm not going to be able to do because my brain, for example, doesn't work the same way that it used to. It never, and I felt at the beginning that perhaps it's not going to come back and be a brain that can support stuff like an audio podcast, or stuff like writing a book or anything. And I didn't know what was going to be possible either. So I felt like I was mourning lost potential in the future.
Yeah.
I don't know if that resonates with you. Did you have any of those types of feelings or thoughts?
It's funny. I did the mourning after the brain tumor when I lost my hearing.
Ah, okay.
So when this happened, I didn't so much mourn the lost potential. I was frustrated by the lack of movement, or the lack of not being able to do things as quickly. But I saw it more as a brain reset. It's like my brain was reset to a childhood time. For example, when my speech started to return, I had a really, really clear British accent. And my first 5 years of life were in the UK. So that's what I had as a really small child. And suddenly I was speaking with this British accent again to the speech therapist. And it wasn't till, weeks later that my old Australian accent returned, because I grew up in Australia. I just moved here like 14 years ago. So,
right.
Yeah. So and everything else, like, how my emotions were affected, like I respond like a child does with, how little kids can't control their emotions. They're crying or they're laughing. Well, I'm responding the same way. The sensory overload you get is like a child or like a toddler, and so I'm exposing myself gradually to more sensory stimulus to try to get used to it again, even to the point where now I found on YouTube the background sounds of a pub with all that noise, and I just listen to it through headphones just to get myself used to the sensory input, because it's really tiring, that much noise going into you after you've had a stroke. And I'm finding that I'm treating myself or treating what's happened after the stroke like a child, and teaching it again how to do things, how to write. I
really like that approach. It's probably the most, because when you're a child, you've got the most potential ahead of you, and you're not going to stop a child, regardless of what happened to that child, to reach its potential, because that child had an injury or something unfortunate happened when it was early on. It's going to go for that recovery, and it doesn't even really know it. It's just instinct is going, well, my friends are playing, I'm going to play, or my friends are doing this, I'm going to do this. So I love that idea of treating yourself like a child, in that you're going to give yourself all the space, I imagine, that a child needs to just go through the motions and be terrible at something for the early stage, and then see the improvement, and then focus on where you've come rather than what you're lacking.
Yeah. And, one thing one of my rehab people said to me early on when I was having home rehab is I would get really angry and frustrated with myself. I couldn't move my arm. And she said, look, your anger is what's stopping you from moving it. you've got to be patient with yourself. And that's when I started realizing that, like, my brain has had a factory reset. And I have a half of me now as a child, like a small child, and I have to treat it like that. I have to treat myself like as a small child, with that patience and love, and you know, and I think, for the most part, it's worked. I mean, I still get frustrated at some things, but nowhere near like I used to. Like, I used to have foot stamping, screaming tantrums like a 2-year-old, because I dropped something, or I was clumsy. So it was like almost funny, the way I was.
We can be our own worst enemies for sure. In that way, in we can put the most pressure on ourselves than anybody.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, but it's well, you have awareness of it now, so that's great. So the pub sound that you put in the background. Have you therefore, because of the sensory overload, because I did this, avoided going into public places?
Yep. And my husband's been really good with knowing how far to push me and knowing when I am overloaded. He's got a really good sense of it. And so and knowing when I just want to be lazy. So if I'm just being lazy, he'll push me to do something. And so we've gone to cafes and restaurants and been there, and when he sees me starting to fade, he knows that I've reached my overload point, and we just go.
Yeah.
And it's been really good, because I've been able to extend the time I can spend in those places. And Monday night, this Monday, I'm doing something new. So I've just enrolled in a postgraduate composition program, and the lecturers and the students are meeting in a pub for pre-lecture drinks and meet and greet. And I wasn't going to go at first, and I thought, no, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to go for as long as I can, handle it for, and see what happens. So so Monday I'm going to rock along to this pub and see if I can stand it.
Yeah.
I mean, they know I've had a stroke, so if I have to go, I'll just go.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to do. I stopped saying no, and then I started going, and then we would just leave earlier.
Mm.
A lot of our parties that we went to during that time, family birthdays, things like that, for me, they would have ended at 9 o'clock or 9:30. We just had to go. We had to go, and we went home. And then as the years went on and the recovery continued, I found myself being able to be there a little longer and a little longer.
Yep.
But I remember, and I've even done the 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning from time to time. But last Friday, so a couple of days ago, today we're recording on Sunday morning, I went out, and it was really hot in Melbourne, and I think I was dehydrated, because I remember really struggling by about 11:30 to get back to the car, as in I was walking fine and I got there, but I remember really not being able to feel my left leg and my foot underneath. So I had to pay attention to walking.
Yeah.
Which is something I haven't done for a while, like really pay attention to make sure. And then I could really feel my balance was out. So most of my time now is really great, in that my deficits don't get in the way. I don't notice them too much, especially when I'm walking and there's friends and we're chatting. I don't notice them. I just keep walking. Whereas this time, in our conversations that we were having while we were walking, I had to really pay attention and notice where my foot was. And that I haven't done that for a while. And that kind of took me back a few years to when I first got out of hospital after brain surgery, where I had to, when we were at a event, and there was a dance floor, and there was necessary for people to get up and go and dance at a certain point in the proceedings of the night. And I was on the dance floor, but I wasn't dancing. I was standing there, just moving, looking down, paying attention to my leg and moving it strategically around the place, so I don't roll an ankle or do some damage, end up on the ground, whatever.
Yeah.
So it gets,
for me, it gets better and better and better and better. And then every once in a while, there's that reminder of, this is how far you've come. Like, this is what it was like X amount of years ago. And that's usually because I've done something to neglect myself that day, whether I haven't slept enough the night before, or whether I've eaten something I shouldn't have, or whether I haven't drank enough water. Something I've done has impacted that in a negative way. And that's kind of the part where I get in my own way unknowingly. And then I've got to have a little bit of a reminder. And that's to be the reminder, the reset. And then it's like, okay, focus again.
So two things come out there I need to ask you. Firstly, are you less tolerant to heat now since yeah,
but only on half my side.
Really?
Yeah. So my left side is the only part that's less tolerant. I love the heat. Bill loves the heat. My left side doesn't do too well with it. It kind of shuts down quicker. It gets heat fatigue quicker.
Yes.
And also the cold. So the cold.
Yes. Oh my God.
Which I really dislike. Bill dislikes it. My left hand side dislikes that even more than Bill dislikes it. We hate the cold together. We don't mind the heat, but the heat fatigues me quicker. Yeah.
I mean, New Zealand's not known for its heat, and I'm in Wellington, so it's even less so. But a few weeks ago, we were having temperatures up near 30, which is really hot for here. And I just found it was wiping me out, like totally. I was getting like heat fatigue so quickly, and I was like basically laying up in front of an air conditioner with a cold pack on my head because I could not function. And I was really surprised that I was that affected by the heat.
Early on, I was that affected as well. So as things have improved and time has passed, and I've become more resilient to it, but early on it was like that. Even though I was enjoying being in the heat, I still was fatigued by it and couldn't participate, for example, at the beach in the same way that I would normally have participated before the stroke. So now, for me, the beach, I've got to be covered, otherwise I don't want to be there by an umbrella or a tree or in the shade somewhere. And before, that wasn't essential, that wasn't necessary.
Yeah. That's the same with me because Andrew's the same. Andrew loved the heat, especially growing up in Adelaide. It's like nice and hot in summer.
The Adelaide weather a couple of days later, right? So that's you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, totally. And yeah, now like I wouldn't go back to Adelaide for a holiday in the summer because, well, not at the moment anyway, because it would just destroy me. I couldn't function. But the other thing that I was going to ask or mention from what you said was your continued recovery. So it's been 10 years and you are still recovering. I was told that my recovery would finish at 6 months.
That's a load of bullshit.
Yeah, and so I was racing and panicking to get as much recovery in 6 months as I could, to the point where I rented a hyperbaric chamber for 3 months.
Excellent. Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. You're going to tell me about that, but let me just go back for a second and go, there's no such thing as recovery for 6 weeks, 6 months or whatever, and it stops. It does never stop. I'm always doing things to try and improve my deficits and to try and be better than I was the day before. Always. It has never stopped. And some days that means doing nothing. That means actually going, you know what, today you have to do nothing, because if you go too far today, you're going to be screwed for the next 2 or 3 days, and there's no point doing that. So I even get into that stage every so often, but the amount of times I find myself there has reduced, and the time between the last time and this time has grown, apart. So that's what you experience. You experience all these things, but in lower, what's the word? Like it's lower, I'm going to use the word volume, like at a lower volume, at a lower level. So I get the reminders of what it was like in 2014 when I had surgery and what it was like in 2012, but when I had the first bleed, but it's not as dramatic and as intense as it was back then. It's just a more milder version.
Yeah.
And I just if I don't take recovery, if I don't consider myself still in recovery, and I go back to doing some of the behaviors or the habits or the patterns that I was in before my whole situation started 10 years ago, I'm going to suffer really, really badly, because
Yeah.
the body that I had back then was resilient enough, more resilient to deal with all the junk that I was doing to it. Right now, it's not going to cope. I'm going to suffer dramatically if I go back to those old routines and old ways of being myself and doing myself and, you know, treating myself. It's not going to work. So
Yeah. It's interesting. I've tried to ponder on why doctors or physios insist on telling people that they'll see the most gains in 6 months and then not to expect anything or very little after that. And, you know, I think maybe they're trying to give people false hope, or maybe because a lot of the people that they do see sort of aren't as motivated, or just
there is a technical reason, an actual reason in the brain that happens. So there's the now for people who are listening, I'm gesturing with my hands and you can't see it, but I'm going to try and explain it at the same time. So there's the area of the brain that was damaged. We'll call that the damaged spot, and then there's the area around it that has been impacted but not damaged by the stroke. So it's kind of like it's like a target on a bullseye. So there's the bullseye where the area has been damaged, and there's the next ring out. That next ring is called the penumbra, and usually it is damaged. It is impacted and kind of put to sleep. But then when the penumbra comes back online, people see the most gains. That's where the gains come, because that comes back online far quicker. Because as the stroke, call it the ischemic stroke, or the hemorrhagic stroke, is dealt with in the actual location where it happened, even though the brain cells around there would be dead and not firing the way they were, the area around it, the penumbra, is going to be just negatively impacted. And then it's going to start settling down. And then as it settles down, you see the most gains. So they go after a lot of recovery during that time. And they know that if they can encourage recovery, because they know they're going to benefit from the penumbra coming back on board. Right? So that's why they say that. They don't have a good way of describing it, and they don't explain it properly, and they don't even tell you
at all.
Or at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there is a combination of we'll also not set the expectations too high, because we don't want to disappoint them and we don't want to give them hope where there isn't any. And they're doing it from a perspective of a non-stroke survivor. Even though they work in stroke, even though they understand what's going on, they've never lived the experience, and they are coming at it from somebody who is naive in that space. So there's a couple of things kind of working against them to give us the appropriate information about what is happening and why they say what they say about the 6-month period. Recovery continues forever. I know people who have interviewed who have said that hand and arm movement came back 10 years later.
Wow.
And that was, I imagine, now, not that they would know, but I imagine it was because of what we spoke about earlier, learned non-use.
Yes.
At the beginning, they thought their hand isn't working, therefore they didn't use it. They weren't encouraged to butter their bread with the affected hand. And 10 years down the track, the hand was just sitting there idly by, waiting for somebody to rehabilitate it. And when they got curious about it and thought, oh, let's see if I can get something back with this hand, let's see if I can rehabilitate it, that's when the hand started to go, yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I can
got
work.
some of their hand back, you know?
Yeah, like, because I wish someone explained that to me, because it's so clear, and it's so like so obvious to me now how, the brain heals. Because I just remember thinking that I had this time limit, and yet I've seen constant improvement past, and even to, even to last week, I'm seeing improvement. But I think it's not really appropriate for physios to be giving devices that help people or aid people to use their non-affected side. Let me think of something. Like devices that help you hold a knife, like, properly, or just or in a car, like a steering wheel device, you have to, you can do it with one hand.
Yeah.
All those things, are great if you have actually only got one hand.
Yeah.
But if you've got another hand, you've got to use it. You've got to use it.
Yeah. I hear you. I know exactly what you mean. There is kind of a decreasing of, but see, it's also guided by the people who are recovering, right? So there's some people who will go, and fair enough, I need to drive. I need to drive now, and I can't drive with one hand. I need a steering wheel knob thing, whatever
Yeah.
it's called, get it for me. And it's so complicated, this whole recovery, and every stroke is different, and everyone's impacted by it differently. And some people aren't going to get their hand back, whereas some might. I think that everyone has to go after getting it back and see if they can. And then if they can't, for sure, we need to make sure that people are able to still be,
but not go straight to the aids, because they're impatient.
Yeah.
Because impatience can drive you to, to doing those, and then not using your affected side.
Yeah. I was speaking to a stroke survivor yesterday, and we were talking about some of the things that get in the way of helping recovery as well. And I'm going to mention it now because this particular stroke survivor wasn't told to stop drinking alcohol. And the Australian Stroke Foundation says you have to stop drinking alcohol for at least 12 months. I didn't drink alcohol for 5 years. One of the reasons is because the brain is already inflamed. And what alcohol does is it inflames it further. And what we want to do is we want to decrease the things that inflame the brain so that we can give it more chance for the neurons that are sleepy to come up, to come awake.
Yeah.
So that we can utilize them and then support them and strengthen them. So the reason I mentioned it to this other gentleman was because he was waiting to get his skull reinstalled in his brain because they removed it when he had his stroke because he had a lot of swelling and inflammation. And the doctors are saying to him, until the inflammation goes down, we cannot put the skull back in place. So he'll eventually get it back. And when he told me that, and told me at the same time, or a few minutes later, he told me that he was drinking a couple of beers every so often, I realized that he's getting in the way of getting his skull back.
Yeah.
He's continuing to do things that will inflame the brain, will keep it swelled, will stop them from putting the skull on. And the thing that he's most motivated to see is his skull back on his head, so that he's going to feel more like himself. He's going to start to identify as himself much more. And even those types of things. I would have thought that in this situation, he would have been told in no uncertain terms, you should not be doing any of these things, one of them being drink alcohol from now on.
Yeah, so would I.
But
especially when you've got like no skull.
Yeah, but it was missed, right? And that's the thing. Sometimes we get in our own way because we need to go back to what you said. Life, or the way we used to do things quickly because we're impatient. And we don't understand that there's been a line drawn in the sand. Things are different now, and our old patterns and behaviors need to be modified because they don't serve. Some of them won't serve us with this new way that we have to go about life, or new skills that we have to learn, or the stuff we have to overcome. And it's really important for people to kind of understand that there has to be a shift. What was good for you before stroke may not be good for you now. And you can just park it for now and pick it up later. If it's worth it, you can pick it up later. But for right now, some of those things you have to park. One of them, 100%, is alcohol. So I'm not sure if you were told about alcohol.
No, I wasn't, but I don't really drink anyway. So it's like, you know, I wasn't, ever since the tumor, the alcohol had a different effect on me and it wasn't pleasant. So I stopped drinking. And so,
what
yeah.
did it affect you like? So for me, I don't drink because it makes me feel like I'm having another stroke.
For me, it made me feel sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just wasn't pleasant. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. And so I stopped drinking years ago, after the tumor. And so, yeah, like now, you know, having the stroke, I haven't missed it.
So,
but I know a bit about the inflammation as well. Like I've been reading about that. So I mean, that's one of the other reasons I got the hyperbaric, was to try and reduce the inflammation.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Like climbing into a hyperbaric chamber, and how long does it last for? How long does it take? And what do you notice?
So I had it for 3 months in the house. It's like a really thick plastic tube, and it has a little seat inside it. And basically you're breathing really through a mask or a cannula in your nose, really highly oxygenated air, almost, you know, 100% pure, or close to it. They raised the air pressure inside the chamber to 1.5 or 2 times the normal air pressure. So what it does is it forces the oxygen into the cells. I found I was in the chamber for an hour and a half every day, and I couldn't wait to get in there. I loved it. It was like having a little cocoon. I just get a blanket in there, and I had my headphones and listen to meditations, and I would just meditate, guided meditations, and just doing that for an hour and a half every day. It was the best. I mean, if I could afford to buy one, I'd buy one. You know, it was so good, so good.
Did you notice improvements in your deficits? Did it help in that way? Is that what you experienced?
Yeah, well, I did actually. But you know, I don't know if it was the act of the hyperbaric and the oxygen, or it was the fact that for an hour and a half every day I was meditating and I was calm and I wasn't thinking about everything, or a combination of both. I don't know what it was, but I definitely saw improvement.
Combination of both, for sure. Absolutely. Meditation is like a superpower. If you can meditate and you can put yourself into a state of calm and create the right environment, healing will happen. You know, it does.
Yep.
But then the hyperbaric, doing it in hyperbaric with oxygen in that state, is definitely oh man, what a combination of the two things to do. I love that you meditated. So are you meditating sitting down, lying down? How do you?
So it's like you kind of get a seat in there, but it's sort of laid back seat. So it's not an upright seat. So you're kind of laying back in the seat, and it's really, really comfortable. And you know, I had a thick blanket in there as well. So I was cocooned, you know, in this chamber, and the chamber gets really warm after a while, but not like uncomfortably warm, but just warm, nice warm. So it was just such a safe space, especially after a stroke, you know, and when everything in your world is chaotic. It was such a nice, calm, safe space for me. I really loved it.
Have you been able to recreate that feeling, say in bed with a warm blanket?
Yeah, well, I still keep on meditating every day, and just do it on my bed, but with a warm blanket. But it's not the same, you know. It's like I have an eye mask as well, so I'm blackout. But yeah, there's that one element missing.
Yeah, the little cocoon.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So, what has stroke taught you?
Oh my God, so much, so much. I mean, where do I start? I guess the most important thing, the most important thing it's taught me is that Andrew Stopps is potential. Andrew Stopps is not musician or husband or educator or any of the other labels that society gives us. Andrew Stopps is potential. That's what it's taught me.
That's brilliant. I love that. On that note, Andrew, thank you so much for reaching out and being on the podcast. I really appreciate you connecting with me, and I'm so happy to have you on the show, and I'm glad that you've come such a long way, especially since you've had that experience earlier on in your life in your mid-20s and stroke, and that you've come out of both of those, and you still talk about your potential. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot. I really enjoy being here. Thanks for having me.
That's all right, man. Oh, wow. What a chat, Andrew. Thank you. I'm going to edit this and put all my intros and outros in it, and it'll be up in about 2 weeks. I'll let you know when it's up.
Yep.
I love your work, man. I love what you're doing. Congratulations, and keep going. If there's anything you need from me, just reach out. If you've got any questions to ask, if you're not sure about something, if you want to do the old, did this happen to you, or just let me know.
Yeah. Like I was really like, I had such an aha moment when you were describing what happens in the brain, like with the penumbra. Like I was just going, oh my God, why didn't someone tell me this? This is genius. That was perfect. Thanks, man.
You're welcome. And it's the same thing that I went through. I had to do constant and never-ending research, YouTube, Google, you name it. And then I was getting these aha moments and going, okay, all right, I can now I can breathe a sigh of relief, or I can deal with that, or I can approach it differently. It's just, I don't blame doctors and nurses because they do a great job. I mean, without them, we wouldn't be here. But there's got to be some middle person, a liaison that says, here's a book of things. And all it is like a list of words or stuff. And then there's a paragraph in the middle of the book about it. Just go there and have a bit of a look.
Yeah. Well, I've contacted the local hospital a couple of times now and just said, look, can I go in and just sit with newly stroke patients and just answer any questions or just talk to them about their experience? Because, as a teacher, I'm like police checks and everything, so that I don't have to worry about any of that. But it's too hard for the hospitals to organize. And which is such a shame because, like, from all the stroke survivors I've talked to, they were, they all said they would love to have had someone that could just sit with them for 20 minutes, in the hospital and just, show them what's possible.
Can you not do it even as just a guest to the ward? Can you not even just be somebody who turns up and goes for a walk around the ward?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose I could.
With their blessing. You know how sometimes there's, I don't know, preachers that go around, or I don't know who, but there's some advocates that you see floating around the place. I wonder if they could just let you do it like that.
Yeah, well, there's a stroke foundation here, but they're so underfunded, and I've tried to work with them, and like, I mean, even when they came out to visit me, they didn't come to visit me until 3 months after my stroke, and they stayed for like 20 minutes and gave me some pamphlets and left. It was totally, like, it was useless. So I've tried to approach them as well to ask, if they could organize for me to go in hospital. I would really like to do that. I really would like to do that. Because, we both know how scary it is. when you're laying in hospital and you don't know what the hell's going on.
You need reassurance. I immediately seeked out somebody through the family that had a brain hemorrhage in his 20s as well. And I'd never met the guy before, but he just happened to turn up on my doorstep literally 2 bloody weeks before my brain surgery. And he had brain surgery. So it was like, oh man, this is exactly what I needed. We went through a real lengthy conversation about what to expect and what's going to happen later and all that. It was absolutely a game changer. I went into surgery instead of being anxious and afraid. I went in being really calm
and confident.
Yeah. Just changed everything.
Well, I knew that my dad had a stroke in the early 2000s. My dad passed away in 2018, so I couldn't talk to him about it. But I remember he'd had a stroke and like he fully recovered, like literally, like you would never know for the latter part of his life. And so I just kept hanging on to that. Like if my dad can have a stroke and fully recover, then so will I. But yeah, I would have really liked to have just had someone who I could ask questions. Is this normal? Is feeling this normal? Am I having another stroke? Or is that normal?
Reach out, man. Reach out anytime, honestly. I mean,
I will. Yeah.
Just send me an email. I always get my emails, and we can do a quick catch-up Zoom call or whatever, or I can just send you a message back anytime now.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. That's great.
Right. Just give me a 7 a.m. start, right? Yeah. Around 7 a.m. is when the world is okay for me. Anything before that, then I'm stuffed.
Yeah. No worries.
All right, mate. I appreciate it so much. I will get in touch with you and let you know when it's live.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Have a great day.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. To learn more about my guests, including links to their social media and other pages, and to download a full transcript of the entire interview, please go to recoveryafterstroke.com/episodes. If you would like to try the course 5 Foods to Avoid After Stroke, go to recoveryafterstroke.com/courses and get on board now. If you would like to support this podcast, the best way to do it, and I will really appreciate it if you do, is to leave the show a 5-star review and a few words about what the show means to you on iTunes and Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, comment below the video, like this episode, and to get notifications of future episodes, subscribe to the show on the platform of your choice. If you are a stroke survivor with a story to share about your experience, come and join me on the show. Interviews are not scripted. You do not have to plan for them. All you need to do to qualify as be a stroke survivor or care for someone who is a stroke survivor, or you are one of the fabulous people that help others who are stroke survivors. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com/contact, fill out the contact form, and as soon as I receive your request, I will respond with more details on how you can choose a time that works for you and me to meet over Zoom. Thanks again for being here and listening. I really appreciate you. See you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gasiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation education program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.